All right, guys. So today we're taking a look at the updated bubble picture if the season ended today, talking the last four buys, last four in, first four out, next four out. So breaking it down, there's about 6 spots at the moment for bubble teams. And you've got about 25, 30 teams fighting for those 6 spots. Could potentially be 7 if, like Dayton wins the A10, for example. That would open up another bubble spot. TCU and Michigan State, I think, are in. So basically what they're fighting for here is these last 2 buys, all right, and then the last 4 in, which we'll get to in a minute. But TCU and Michigan State for sure in, I think. Then FAU, Memphis are these bubble teams getting in. So pretty much it's like a last 6 in. Now, if FAU or Memphis wins the American instead of South Florida or somebody else, then obviously another team would go in here. But at the moment, I've got South Florida winning the American and then FAU and Memphis closing out the last 4 buys. Let's take a look at their resumes here. 1 second. Let me pull this up for you. All right, so looking at FAU, all right, sitting at 22-7, wins over Arizona, really big win there. Butler, another team on the bubble. Loyola Chicago, another team on the bubble. Good losses to Illinois, USF, which at this moment I have in the tournament, and Memphis, which is obviously another bubble team. FAU, went on that good run last year. I think they're in no matter what. I don't think they're really a bubble team. I think they're in whether they win their conference or not. They've got too good of a resume not to be. All right, then talking about Memphis, they're a little more iffy. All right, so we got wins over FAU, Virginia, A&M, VCU, and Clemson. Other than Clemson, those are all teams on the bubble. All right, FAU, like I said, is in. Virginia, VCU, A&M, we'll get to them in a little bit. I don't think they're probably going to be in. But Clemson is probably a top 6, top 5 seed at this point. And you've got good losses to South Florida, Ole Miss, and Villanova. Besides South Florida, those are all bubble teams. South Florida kind of on the bubble too. Memphis, they're kind of hit and miss. I think they'll get in off of potential alone. Look at last week. They were down like 20 to UAB in the first half. They ended up beating UAB by 20. Memphis is capable of playing with anybody in the nation, but they're also capable of losing anybody in the nation. So we'll see what happens. If they go on a good run, though, to at least the semis in the American tournament, I think they're in. All right, now talking last 4 in, we've got Seton Hall, Indiana State, Appalachian State, and Villanova. We'll get to them in a second. Indiana State and Drake, I think the loser of that game is going to be in if they both make the championship. Drake has the better resume, so they would actually have a better chance of getting in than Indiana State if it was an at-large, but I think the loser's in regardless. Then Appalachian State, they're kind of fighting for that spot with James Madison, okay? So Appalachian State currently in first place. They've beaten James Madison twice in the regular season, but it's tough to beat a good team 3 times, and at this moment, I have James Madison winning the Sun Belt, which will put Appalachian State in the bubble picture. All right, so let's talk about these teams. Seton Hall are at 18-11. A lot of losses, but have some really good wins and good losses. You've got a win over Marquette, a win over UConn, losses to Creighton, Baylor, really good losses, and Iowa. Okay, so that Iowa loss could come into play eventually. Iowa's another team on the bubble. And a lot of the teams that are on this bubble have played each other. Okay, so eventually the committee is going to have to take a look at not just quad 1 wins, not just quad 2 wins, bad losses, all that stuff. They'll have to look a little head to head. So, for example, if Iowa beats Seton Hall, does Iowa get the nudge over Seton Hall? I don't know. We'll see. At the moment, though, I don't have them getting in. All right, Indiana State, next team on the bubble for me. All right, that is among the last 4 in. Wins over Drake, wins over Toledo. That Toledo is actually not a bad win. Toledo is currently in second place in their conference. And I think you got to reward them for scheduling out of conference, okay? So really tough non-con games, losses to Alabama and Michigan State. You got to give them credit for scheduling those games, I think. And I think they get in regardless. Like I said, Drake has the better resume because they have a win over Nevada. But I think Indiana State is still in. All right, next up, Appalachian State sitting at 26-5, wins over Auburn. That's a really big win. That's going to come into play here if they're an at-large team. Then it went over James Madison. So they actually, similar to the last one, they have a better resume over James Madison, I think, if it comes down to that. That win over Auburn, really important there. And then they have a loss to Oregon State. All right, next up, among my next 4 in, Villanova. All right, Villanova sitting at 17-12. All right, wins over North Carolina, Texas Tech, Memphis, and Creighton. All of those being tournament teams, that's going to come into play here. Villanova, not the best record, but those wins are going to come into play. That win over North Carolina is big. That win over Tech's big. And scheduling out of non-con, I think they're going to reward them for that. Losses to UConn and Marquette are the good losses. All right, next up, first 4 out. You've got Providence, New Mexico, Utah, Virginia. You're seeing a lot of these Big East schools here. Like I said, they've all played each other. And among, think back to Villanova, They've all played each other. All right. So that's going to come into play at some point, but a lot of them are split with each other. So it's kind of hard to decipher. But Providence, 18-11 wins over Creighton, Wisconsin, Marquette, all tournament teams. Then you've got losses to UConn and OU. Them and Villanova, that's a tough toss up there, Providence and Villanova. I think both have really good arguments to be in, but will they get in? We'll see. Probably going to depend on what they do in the Big East tournament. All right, next up, New Mexico sitting at 21-8. They could be in. All right, New Mexico. It's going to come down to what does the committee think of the Mountain West. If they think the Mountain West is really good, they have a lot of teams in, by the way, probably 5 or 6. If they really value the Mountain West, New Mexico is going to be in because they've got wins over Louisiana Tech, which is currently in first place in their conference. All right, win over San Diego State. That's a big win. Win over Utah State, another tournament team that's ranked, and then a win over Colorado State. Then they have losses to St. Mary's and Boise State, both good losses. I think New Mexico, out of all these teams we've discussed so far, has the best chance to get in. Next up, Utah wins over Wake Forest, which is on the bubble. St. Mary's, that's a good win. BYU, tournament win. Washington State, another tournament win. And then Colorado and Oregon, which are also on the bubble. All right, then you've got losses to Houston, really good loss there. Lost to St. John's, another team on the bubble. So that could come into play if St. John's passes Utah. They've got a loss to Arizona. All right, next up, Virginia, 21-9. Really good record, but who we kidding? Nobody wants to watch Virginia in the tournament. Their offense is just terrible. Wins over Clemson, Texas A&M, Florida. Clemson and Florida could get them in, though, having that win. Those wins, and then good losses to North Carolina, Duke, Wisconsin, and Memphis, all tournament teams at the moment, in my opinion. Memphis on the bubble, though. All right, then looking at the next 4 out, Wake Forest, Ole Miss, Colorado, and Richmond. Wake Forest, really good at home. Away, not so much. All right, so at home, they have wins over Florida, Duke, Syracuse, and Virginia. They also have losses to North Carolina and Utah. All right, so I don't think they can get in over Utah because they have that loss, but Florida and Duke could come into play here. Next up, Ole Miss, really good record, wins over Memphis, Florida, A&M. I think the lack of a really good win is going to hurt them here. Memphis and Florida aren't bad, but they're not just anybody that's a top 5 seed. I think that's going to come back to bite Ole Miss here. But really good losses, as you can see at the bottom right, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, and Auburn. All right, next up, Colorado, 20-9, wins over Washington State, Utah, Oregon, Richmond. Then when Utah split, so that's what I was talking about earlier. Good losses to Colorado State and Arizona. So the thing hurting them here is besides Washington State, those are all tournament teams. Bubble teams. Washington State's only confirmed tournament team out of those 4 big wins, and that might come back to bite Colorado. They do have some potential. They've got an NBA draft pick that is going to be entertaining to watch if they do make the tournament, but we'll see. If they do make the tournament, though, I think they could make a run. All right, and last but not least here, Richmond sitting at 22-7, really good record, but they lack kind of quality wins that could get them in. Wins over Loyola Chicago, that's a bubble team. Dayton, that's a tournament win. Charlotte, another team that not really in the bubble, but ranked 3rd in the American right now. Win over UNLV, pretty good resume, pretty good record. Then a win over VCU, which is also on this bubble. And then losses to Florida and Colorado. That Colorado loss probably going to come back to bite them. Richmond is probably going to need that win to win the A-10. It is possible, though. I think they could win the A-10. I think they're in first at the moment in the A-10. So definitely possible. But will it happen? That I don't know. But these are my current list of last 4 in, first 4 out, etc. Let me know your last 4 in at the moment. If the season was the end of the day, let me know your last 4 in. Let me know. Comment down below. Make sure to like this video and subscribe.